you have found your way into the secret clubhouse of the NoPro Review Crew. I'm Noah Nelson, founder and publisher of No Proscenium. Tonight, I am joined by the Review Crew's elite cutthroat squad of reviewers who do nothing but make immersive creators cry. That is not true. That's not true at all. Joining us in Los Angeles is the LA Review's editor.
Hey, Ray, this is Kevin Gossett.
Also joining us in LA is our arts editor.
Hi, this is Laura Hess.
And I don't even know where he is these days because he's our East Coast editor at large, which allows him to not be in a single city. All right. Each week here on the crew, we get together and we talk about usually like the most interesting thing we saw that week. We'll put it that way. Some of which are vying for the pick of the week. And by the end of it, we hope to have a sense of what's going to be the pick. And then that shows up on the main show on the Friday podcast drop. All of you only have probably about a day before you find out what that's going to be. This time out, we spun the wheel, and kicking us off is going to be Blake. Blake, what's on the list for you this week, and is it potential pick of the week material?
So I think it's definitely potential pick of the week material. I am bringing Journey to the Kingdom of Hypnos by Spectacle and Mirth. So this is a really well-crafted, well-written pod play that uses immersive audio techniques, original music, and a really carefully balanced script to take you on sort of a guided meditation to the realm of sleep itself, diving down to that lowest part of the underworld. Not lowest in terms of, I suppose it would be the highest, to the shallowest part of the underworld that we descend every night. And so you are guided by Mnemosyne, the Greek goddess of memory, as she tries to inform you about some problems going on down there that I might get a little bit more into later. And what really stuck out to me about it was just how clever it was, how thorough it was, and how engrossing and environmental it was.
So there's so many versions of Podplay. And Maker knows that plenty of people pitch us all kinds of things. What makes this stand out in the sense that, we're all about the immersivity of things?
First things first, I gotta give kudos to the audio engineering on Kingdom of Hypnos. For people who were big fans of Darkfield Radio, while it might not be to that degree of, completely, every last detail engineered, it's startlingly well done. If you've got a good pair of headphones, definitely use them. The 3D audio is great. You can feel the swirling mists of the underworld around you, which take the form of a lot of really what could have been kind of cheesy. It could have ended up as those tracks you find at Bed Bath & Beyond of, soothing nighttime sounds. But it manages to use a lot of these things people listen to go to sleep, rushing water, gentle mists, even light traffic at one notable point, to really create this really nice audio landscape. And the other thing that I think really kind of pushes it from just, a fiction podcast, say You're Welcome to Night Vales of the world, is the way in which it engages the audience. I think that there's this very delicate tightrope when you're writing a pod play where either you are under-explaining things and the audience doesn't quite know what they're paying for, and it's closer to maybe just, a more standard guided meditation rather than an immersive experience. And then there's over-description, where it gets burdensome and the transportive nature of it gets bogged down in all the detail being added. And this walks that beautifully. It manages to have character and conflict and a narrative thrust that feels theatrical while still allowing you the space to breathe and fill it in with your own dreams and imagination, which is also really thematically central to the piece about sort of the competing virtues of the peaceful ignorance of sleep and the joyful but difficult world of waking memory.
Interesting. So, like, I mean, I guess who are you to the characters in the piece when you're listening? Because I think that's often one of the things that people making this stuff have a difficulty kind of nailing.
So I think they really did a smart thing in just letting you play yourself here.
Mm.
The podcast begins sort of with a classic hero's journey summons that Memnisi is actually quite angry with you. She's pissed off that you've been ignoring all the signs. You've been forgetting the prophetic dreams she's been sending you, the synchronicities that have been dotting your life to guide you to this moment. And so she's come to have to take you by the hand to go down to the underworld to see the trouble that's been brewing as the banks of the River Leth are overflowing. And that's a really good entry point because while it does assume, I guess, some base familiarity with Greek mythology, which, I mean, let's face it, it's having a moment right now. Hades was Game of the Year last year, and Hades Town had won the Tony right before that. But it goes from that assumption of just, they're gods, there's an underworld, and it manages to sort of step by step piece together the trail you walk to get to this place. The title should be taken very literally. It is a journey, and it does a really nice job of having the liminal spaces of a journey and giving those room to breathe, not just having, a departure and a destination.
And so is this journey, is the design structured so that this is something that you are to listen to like just prior to sleep? Or is this, how did you listen to it?
So I will admit that I was a very bad boy. And it slipped my mind that I had to do this until the very last minute. And while I was super excited for it, I had just missed the link in my inbox. And so I said, okay, I'll take it as my coffee break today, of all things. I'll go to sleep before I grab myself a cup of joe to wake up. And I just found a dark, quiet room in my office building, slipped on my headphones, and closed my eyes right before I heated up my lunch. And I had a really fabulous time doing that. It was this kind of, stressful, hectic morning, but the piece assumes that you're awake. I think that you could get a lot out of it approaching it, around when you're going to bed, but it is soothing enough and it also requires enough attention that I might actually recommend you approach it while you're wide awake. But the things it definitely requires are dark and quiet. If you've got dark and quiet, any time of day is good enough. The goddess doesn't assume you're in bed or anything.
Like this one's running for just a little while longer, correct?
Yes, it's running through July 31st, so grab your tickets now and cross your fingers for an extension because I am a big fan.
All right. We're going to keep on pushing on it. I think it's part of a festival out of Cleveland. So, but maybe that just means it'll get to make another festival stop on a circuit, it being a recording after all. So yes, pray for extension. Laura, I believe you drew the next slot. What do you have for us this week? And is it pick of the week material?
So I'm going to take us back to Las Vegas. I definitely think this is pick of the week material, although I'm actually now very intrigued to do Journey to the Kingdom of Hypnos. So this is over at Area 15, the new experiential playground in Las Vegas that houses Meow Wolf's Omega Mart. This is about Cluster, which is an immersive sight and sound experience located within Museum Fiasco. And Museum Fiasco, it's in Area 15. It is a permanent art installation space. And again, the current installation is called Cluster. Cluster is made by Play Modes, which is an AV research studio. It's actually located in Spain. And Cluster is, so it's within a 4,000 square foot mirror box. So fans of Kusama's Mirror Infinity Rooms, love this. And it has, the entire program actually consists of 3 chapters. And there's an issue that I have with that I'll get to later. So each of these chapters rotates about every 45 to 60 minutes. And you just walk in. There's nothing to do. There's nothing for participants to actively do. It's just to walk into the space, explore the space. And again, it's a light and sound experience that goes through a whole sort of range of tracks within each of those 3 chapters that I mentioned.
So I've got a quick question. I've seen the pictures and it looks stunning. What would you say elevates this to sort of a fine art experience as opposed to, say, a 29 rooms or some sort of Instagram installation?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, this is definitely I love going to these experiences. I mean, this is something I've been doing long before NoPro, whenever I could. And I think so much of the work out there is really fantastic, but you do run into a different kind of end of that spectrum. And I mean, I will throw this out with the caveat that 29 Rooms is branded as a branded experience. So there is that difference, to be fair. But I also feel like, especially with the most recent 29 Rooms that I went to, which I think was 2019, there can be a real, I think, especially when you're focusing sort of more on just like light and sound, it's really tech driven. I mean, very, very sensory driven, but it really does have to be thoughtfully designed. And that sounds like maybe a gross oversimplification, but I think it's really worth unpacking. There's so much that again, in my experience at 29 Rooms, where it really did feel sort of surface, even if that wasn't necessarily the intention. I think there were a number of like wonderful artists that have participated in 29 Rooms, but I think that whatever the brief is or whatever the brand limitations might be, it doesn't feel like you can really either A, get into any real immersive sense, and B, it just doesn't necessarily feel like there's a lot of depth. I feel like it's the exception to the rule in the case of something like 29 Rooms. And in this case, it felt it felt really expansive, is maybe the best way that I can describe it. It's meditative, but with an edge. You feel very compelled to move, not just to dance. I think I mentioned this in my capsule review. There's a real sense of wanting to move through the space and not just from an exploratory standpoint, but to like really feel your body moving in conjunction with this light and sound program. And again, it goes through some very intense moments. It settles. Content advisory that I should throw out there, though, that there is strobing. So for anyone that has any issues with that, that's something to keep aware of. But it is, it really does allow you to settle into, we're talking about journeys, and there's a very high quality journey that you can go on with this that doesn't involve a lot of thinking. It's a wonderful complement to all of the narrative, sort of complex narratives that we might see in other productions.
Oh, go for it, Kevin.
Oh, I was saying, can you kind of like explain a little bit more about what like happens in the space? Because I'm not I'm not 100% clear.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great point. I should have explained that a little bit more. So you do have this 4,000 square foot mirror box, but in the midst of all of that, which and it is very clear if you look at the photographs. So there are these columns. There are columns throughout the space, but other than that, it's open. There's no sort of props. There's no furniture, nothing like that. But there are these columns, and then there are LED strips on all of these columns. And there's some, kind of fog machine work in there. So you have this like wonderful misty sensibility to the air. And then, so there's music and sound effects, and there's even some spoken dialogue worked into that. So that's on the audio side. And then the LED lights, they're synced to that. And so there's strobing, there's pulsing, there's it's the number of different colors. There's total darkness, there's bright light. So you go through this program, and this is where I'll also flag my one issue, is that I only got to experience one of the 3 chapters, because while I loved this experience, I was not going to stay in it for 3 hours. So I do wish that the chapters were shorter. Maybe
Each experience is an hour long.
Each chapter, yeah. So the full experience
Wow.
is composed of 3 chapters, and each chapter is about 45 to 60 minutes. Those were the numbers I was given. So I did not stay for a full 45 minutes in the first chapter to get through. I also had other timed experiences at Area 15. But so, yeah, I do wish that the chapters were more like 20 minutes. You could really get into that chapter. You could cycle through it a couple of times, and then you could experience the other 2 chapters all within a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, because I was saying that just sounds like a lot of time to spend in like a very light and strobe and audio heavy experience.
Yes.
And they expect you to sit in there for like 3 hours straight. Yeah, I can see why
Exactly.
you would want to do that.
No, it's very intense. So yeah,
This is the one thing at Museum Fiasco. Like, is there anything else in other rooms in Museum Fiasco, or this is the installation?
Yeah, no, another great question. This is the installation, and they will rotate the programming. They will have other installations, but this is Museum Fiasco's presentation right now. Is this one installation cluster? And again, it's very large. It's wonderful to be in there. I was in there alone. I was in there with other people. It's a very intense and really rich experience, but yeah, you can't stay in it for 3 hours.
And you can't leave and come back, right? It's like
No.
So like it's got the parking garage rules where it's like
Yes.
no ins and outs.
Exactly.
And how much?
Cost wise?
Yeah. Do you remember how much it was?
Yeah, very affordable, $17. I thought it was so worth the ticket.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it. It's and I would have loved to have seen the other chapters to know how intense those were, because again, I think then you've got more leeway to really explore taking someone on a journey of like building up, because it does get very intense. But the chapter that I saw, I don't know, maybe that was the most intense one. Maybe they're all sort of equally intense. I would be really curious to see how those pair together.
So we're not going to ask this question right now, but I'm going to plant it in your mind. And when we do the Teamspeak episode of the show next month, also, by the way, y'all, we're going to do a Teamspeak episode of the normal podcast next month. Just informing you guys what your lives are going to be like. This is how I roll. I'm flag for me that we're going to come back around and ask you, when it comes to the art side of things, what is it that you're chasing? Because the way you spoke about this stuff, and I think it's a really great one, particularly with, we've got a whole piece about the kind of immersive art stuff, the business of it, like Go and the Super Blues of the world, all of that. That's on the main podcast this week. Ricky Briganti put that together for us, and we've got people from each of those companies. But since you're our arts editor, we're going to come around at some point. We're going to ask you what it is you're chasing. So just be thinking about that, and know that your turn is coming.
I love it.
And now we're gonna slide over to Kevin, who's next in the order. We've got 4 tonight, by the way. I'm last. We're saving the worst for last. No, me being the worst, not the thing I'm talking about being the worst. Don't misinterpret. Kevin, what do you have this week? And should it be pick of the week material?
So this week, I've got Blaseball, which probably should not be pick of the week yet. It's in the middle of the last season of a major arc for the the game, which is what it is. It's a browser-based baseball simulator. It's also a horror game. So right now, what's happening in the game in this final week of this era is teams are. It has, I don't know, like 24 teams in it right now. They are traveling across the immaterial plane to escape from the sun, which is a square sun that has gone supernova. So teams are trying to pilot across the immaterial plane to safety, whether that's in the desert, the Hall of Flame, a black hole, or a the vault. So that's kind of where it's at right now, which is a bizarre spot to be in, I guess, for what started out as a baseball simulator.
Wait, so can I jump in already?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I know that you, Kevin, you have expertise and so much love for both horror and you've talked about Blazeball before. I am still not completely sure what Blazeball is, how I would participate, how I would what I'm experiencing. And then I also have specific questions about where you're at right now.
all that shit I just said. Yeah, so it's a browser-based horror simulator, sort of, but it's also like a community building simulator where it runs these baseball games on what's called the immaterial plane. There's a bunch of different gods. There was like a peanut god that started in the first era of the game, and now there's a coin god. And part of it has always been like a critique of capitalism and sports and the way those kind of things interact and how they kind of affect both the people around them and the players that play those sports. So there's a couple different ways to engage with the game. The main one is through what was originally betting on the different games, which has kind of changed in ways to idolize different players and ways to get money, so you can influence your team and the league overall by voting for wills and then other kind of things that affect the league and your team. So some of those are wide ranging, with the one that put some of the black holes into place. That was a thing that happened at one point. Some of them are smaller, which is moving a player from the lineup to the rotation so your team is stronger and can win more. You can hop in on the website, which is just blaseball.com. This is truthfully a really bad time to hop in. Like I said, it's the end of a whole story arc. Things have gone to complete hell, and it's very hard to, I think, probably understand what's happening on the site right now. But it is a good time, and I think it's doing some very interesting things. And the reason I do talk about this is I feel that it is kind of immersive in the way that these characters and kind of appear on the site and the way you kind of engage with the game. It doesn't feel like a normal simulator because there's kind of these otherworldly elements to it, and the characters they show up and they interact. And actually in this last week or so, some of them gotten a lot of kind of character development as far as they go, which is wild for, again, a baseball simulator, or what started as one and is now something off in its own world.
From what I understand, your major attraction to it is it's got that long form ARG storytelling baked into it, along with this kind of core, relatively simple game mechanic at the heart of it. But it's not really about that baseball simulation. It's about this big world building act that they're doing. And they do give you some tools, but those tools kind of can affect the world in ways you don't quite understand, which is also the way some of the larger ARG leveraging immersive theater pieces in LA have done over the years. Am I wrong?
No, that is very much why I'm interested in it, because it is that kind of long form storytelling that is an ARG, and it's using this, again, I keep coming back to it, a baseball simulator, to tell these kind of long, complicated stories involving capitalism and critiques of sports and the way people, even voting and elections, and how people come together to kind of work around those things. It's also just deeply funny at times. This season has gotten really ridiculous because it's the expansion era. So the Coin, who is the main god of this era, is a capitalist, and she's just piled on rules and different things to achieve her own end. So there, at some point, people have implemented grind rails into their Blazeball parks. They've implemented hoops. So sometimes someone will hop on a skateboard and grind from first to third base, or they'll go up for a dunk after they score a home run to score extra points. And it's all these kind of ridiculous things. And then also part of what's gone on in this last era is things, occasionally players are incinerated by rogue empires where they're just killed. So what happened is now with the sun has gone supernova and they can just toast your whole team. So a couple whole teams have just been destroyed in the past week.
Oh, how are the tacos doing?
The tacos are still alive, and
Okay,
I think we're
good.
actually doing okay this
Oh, really? We
season.
sucked. I played at the very beginning. When Blazeball first showed up during pandemic, very popular with like the Waypoint Radio folks, and like I kind of followed them. They get me into all kinds of financial trouble, and so I tapped in for a second to Blazeball long enough to pick the hometown team, the LA Tacos, who became the Unlimited Tacos, who have a very sweet infinity symbol taco logo now. That if I was a man of means, I would own a baseball cap for, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, they're notoriously bad, and then actually won a championship.
They're
I
so
think.
terrible. They're so terrible.
No, we're good. We're good now, man. We won a championship like 7 seasons ago.
Well, and you mentioned seasons. How
Yeah.
long is a season, right? So the expansion era feels like it's been running for like a year now.
It's been running the longest. It started in season 12 and it's run to season 24. It took a long break in there. So around October of last year, I think this is notable too, as far as I think creators designing an ARG or even experiences as far as immersive, they realized it wasn't kind of sustainable the way they were working, and they took some time. They're like, we're just gonna stop putting the game out for people. We're gonna take a break, kind of retool the game and make it more sustainable for players and people to engage with, and for the team working on it to not burn out over the course of this, because the seasons run from Monday morning to usually Sunday morning. So the games typically run from Monday to Friday. Playoffs run Saturday and Sunday, or Saturday, and there's an election on Sunday where kind of new rules take place for the next one. Right now they're in a 3 on, 2 off type thing where they'll run it for 3 on seasons, take 2 seasons off, and then come back for more. After this season, they're going to take an unspecified long break again to I think kind of gear up for the next era, and I think probably find a way to make this more sustainable, because it feels like a lot. It's very hard to kind of like keep up with, and which again feels like some ARGs where it's like you have to kind of be paying attention to it at all the time, which can be frustrating, and you feel like you're missing something. But they've also implemented some things so you can catch up on the site instead of having to dive into the Discord or kind of other fan run things to get a feel for it, which I think has helped. And they kind of have scheduled things where it's like, something's probably gonna happen Sunday morning, sometime on Tuesday, and sometime on Thursday, based on some of the things on the schedules on the site.
And to be clear, a season is a week. That Monday
Yes,
to Sunday
sorry, correct.
cycle, is that is a season. So it's like 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and now they're going to take like a nice long break. And
Yes.
No, I think your point about they're doing some deep modeling of like what sustainability looks like for alternate reality. It's interesting because like I've been learning of late, some of the other parts of the ARG world, and I think we're going to be doing some more dives into that space. There's a few things I'll mention like off the air to you guys. And Blazeball definitely is doing some serious modeling here about what sustainability looks like for this, because the number one thing that's plagued ARG since the beginning of the form, which honestly, like 20 years ago, I think like basically this month or this coming month, like that's when, maybe not even that, like AI was like 20 years ago, and that was Cloud Makers, and Majestic was hitting around the same time. So maybe it was even longer. Maybe last year was the 20th anniversary. I only know because like it was running right up to 9/11, and so 9/11's 20th anniversary is coming in like 2 months, which is weird. So this forum's been around for 2 decades, and the people who created the forum are still very active. They appear on our show, and yet the sustainability thing has been the problem from jump.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think they're working to solve it, and it's again, like this season, like there are so many fucking things happening that it's hard to like keep track of, and it's like kind of got an eye on it where you're like trying to work, and it's like my team survived and my team get incinerated. and now just like having to kind of vote on the regular to keep your ship moving across the immaterial plane here is just taxing. And I think they don't want people to kind of be that engaged. I think they want to encourage breaks, but it's also hard to kind of like when things are being big and dramatic and what they've been building to for at this point 12 seasons. It feels like you want to like be a part of it. So I think that is kind of, it's always that kind of push pull with an energy. It's like I want to experience it, but how do you experience it all the time without feeling crappy?
All right. Well, now it's fallen to me, the long-winded one. And what I have for us this week, also I from a technical standpoint, I would say could be pick of the week material, but I think we'll get into something that I think takes it off the board for that. And that is the Viva Las Vengence VR experience, which at least here in LA is currently at the Westfield Century City. This is a marketing activation for Netflix Army of the Dead. It is a full-on VR zombie killing simulation for up to 6 people, ideally 6 people each time out. What's great about what they've done here is they've done this full build out on the roof of the Century City Mall, the Westfield there. And they've got like a big maquette of the zombie tiger, and there's a speaker nearby and it's roaring and it's just like gorgeous. There's the speakers are running like helicopter sounds above in order to like create the vibe of the encampment just outside of Las Vegas, like on the other side of like the wall where all the zombies have been walled in. So just to be certain, Army of the Dead is the Zack Snyder zombie heist movie set in Las Vegas that dropped, I think, in June on Netflix. So it's a big budget film starring Dave Bautista. I watched it. I liked it. It was actually fun. It was definitely a zombie movie, even though there's some like twists on the zombie genre into it. It's it's a mostly brainless zombie film, but there's a bit of heart into it. I don't despise Zack Snyder as a director. He's really hit and miss for me. When he's usually when he's like allowed to just do whatever he wants to do, it's at least entertaining. And here he was pretty much allowed to do whatever he wants to do. The strange thing is that the movie functionally is really like the end of this story of a zombie outbreak, like a fairly definitive end. Well, not entirely. They set up a sequel, but there's all the stuff they're doing right now. This VR activation. There's another movie they're dropping that's about thieves. It's all about the safecracker who's in it. All of this stuff is done as prequel material, and so this VR game is a prequel to the movie. You're essentially living in the time of the credits sequence of Army of the Dead, which is when Dave Bautista and his team are driving around in a modified taco truck into Las Vegas and doing extraction missions as the zombie outbreak is in full flow before the federal government decides to nuke Vegas and just be done with it. So that's when you are. It's a very fertile time for this story. And the setup, they've built like a full motion simulator ride that you stand or a couple people get to sit in, and you're using Vive Index. So you got some trackers on your hands, you've got a gun prop you pick up, and you're shooting zombies at the side of this taco truck. And it's shaking and moving, and like the haptics are really good and very convincing. Like, I don't know if it's full ride simulator or just the floors are moving, but there were definitely times I was like, wow, we're in it now. And the setup to it is like really elaborate, with helicopter noises going overhead and just like gear everywhere, and you just feel like you've walked onto the set of this movie. And then, you walk through a doorway and you get kind of a very void-like briefing, and then you walk a little bit more and you see the gear as it is. And then it's like, a shooting gallery on haptics. And it's the kind of thing you might find at an amusement park. In fact, in some ways, it's better than some of the kinds of stuff like this I've done at amusement parks. So from a technical standpoint, it's going really solid, really, really solid.
When it comes to a zombie game, I think it's always like, what are the zombies about? Are they fast zombies? Are they slow zombies? Are they creepy zombies? Are they just kind of like a lot of zombies? How does that play into that kind of whole experience with like the actual playing and the movie and just kind of your overall thing, I guess?
Yeah. This is where things kind of really do get interesting because, like, the movie itself plays around with the zombie mythology. They've done a lot of thought about that. It's the movie starts with like, there's an outbreak basically from like Area 51. Like Area 51 had a zombie. It gets out. It infects military guys, and then it causes a lot of havoc. The whole opening sequence is just really this hilarious but also horrific. Watching Vegas get turned as all the tourists are turned, as the showgirls are turned, the Elvis zombies. I did at one point shoot an Elvis zombie in the head. I'm happy to say that check mark there. There's just hordes of zombies in this one, and indeed in the movie, one of the plot things are there are these like intelligent, fast zombies kind of show up, and they have a pet tiger. One of Siegfried and Roy's tigers is a pet tiger. There's an intelligent, fast, zombie tiger. Maybe it probably shows up in the game. Spoilers. What's kind of funky is, I mean, at a certain point it gets a little tedious, just like shooting gallery, shooting gallery, shooting gallery. Tedious enough that you could just start like paying attention to details and noticing. And what I noticed was that as the game went on and we got into kind of like the aggressive, fast zombies at the end, all of the character models for those were like predominantly black and brown. And that was just something I just could not unsee once I saw it, that like the final horde was just black body after black body hurling itself at the truck, and you've got to like blow them away. And that was
like super, super clear on this. Like that's not, they don't look black because they're like decaying or they're the like worst.
No, like black skin, right? These were clearly black people who had become zombies. I mean, it's all CGI, right? Like it's video game graphics, right? So it's not like a recognizable actor or anything like that, but it's definitely one of those things where it, particularly because like it was a grind at a certain point. It's just like, okay, I've shot people like a lot now. Like, okay, I get it. Like the haptics are really cool, but I'm like, I was like, oh wait, all the fast zombies, all the more aggressive zombies are like, oh wow, okay, yeah. And the thing to me that was particularly weird about that were two things. One, in the context of zombie video games, there's like a whole massive discourse around Resident Evil 5, which was set in Africa, and just really played into some like bad stereotypes at the time. And that was one of the first major discussions in the video game discourse about sort of the way that people of color are depicted in games, and just lots of stuff to unpack there. We want to unpack there. The person who kind of like did a lot of great critical work at the time was Nguy Kroll, who I think was still writing for Newsweek at the time. Like he's a consultant these days, and Nguy is freaking great. And he just really kind of called Capcom on that, and that I think I had some reverberations, right? Maybe not as many as everyone would like. What did strike me as kind of weird about these models being used in this game in that way was that the movie did not have that as like remotely an issue. The movie, and I would say Zack Snyder as a creator in particular, particularly if you look at the discourse around Justice League this year and around sort of the way that, the Joss Whedon version of it really sidelined Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg. And in the Snyder cut, I just said the word Snyder cut, but in the Snyder cut, Ray Fisher is like the emotional heart of the movie, and Cyborg is a he's a black character. He's a black man. and Ray Fisher does a really great job. So much so, if you watch those two movies side by side or in close proximity of each other, it's just glaring like how much this dude was sidelined. So it's not something inherent in the property, in the franchise of Army of the Dead, and it really stuck out as a sore thumb in like the third act of this game that we were in that dialectic. And I hope for the developers of the game, and which these things have a lot of moving parts. So, the people who stood up the attraction, like that's one team. The people who probably built the simulator ride, that's another team. I would hope for the sake of the people who made the game that this is, how do we put it politically, a sin of omission, if you will, and not something that was, deliberate on their part. I would bet that, but it also speaks to like how far we have to come as a culture before part of the process is like, oh, should all the really fast aggressive zombies at the end be black? Like, does that feel weird to anybody?
I'm
Yeah.
stating the obvious here, but like, I really do not understand how this went through. I mean, I think it's emblematic of the problem. So there's that, but I'm genuinely very surprised that this was not flagged or noticed by anybody.
I mean, oh, Kevin, go for it.
I think it's like you said, even if it wasn't like intentional, it's one of those things that speaks to the importance of like diversity in art of all kinds, whether it's immersive or theater or even VR, to kind of have people that be like, hey, what the hell are you doing? Like this isn't coming off right. In the case where it is hopefully unintentional.
Yeah. And I would say because of the way that the franchise is structured, right? Like there are actors of color who are in critical roles. They're the leads. They're the sympathetic leads. There's even in the game, like there's a black woman who's driving you around, and she's like one of the team. She saves you, like in the end, as part of it, right? The leader who you're briefing from is a Latina woman, right? And all of that's what's weird to me, is like the franchise is conscious of making clear choices. When a comedian who turned out to be really a terrible person had like already filmed their role, they like digitally rotoscoped that dude out and replaced him with Tig Notaro, who did a great job, and they did it seamlessly. Like they spent real money to like not further the career of like a bad person, and just, which is an impressive act in itself. So it really just feels like, oh, they got a game development shop. They very well probably were just like, well, here's the models we got, because like they're just buying character skins to like feed through like Unreal or whatever, just like because they've got to make a lot of this stuff, so just ripping assets where they could. And just the sheer momentum, like that is why systemic racism is systemic. It is the default. No one goes, hey, what about this? Because there's no time, and there's no one whose job it is to say, hey, what about this? And so if the thing had been shorter or faster or less repetitive, I wouldn't have even noticed. So, but it was those things just long enough for me to go, huh, this is weird.
Yeah, that's just super, again, even if it's not intentional, it's incredibly frustrating and disappointing.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me because of where the game industry is right now. Like this today when we're recording, there's a massive walkout at Activision Blizzard because of, the fallout of the state of California suing the company last week for what stands to be like just some really horrific acts of sexism and discrimination. Some of which was, some stories revolving around Black women that were like targeted. and then the company's response that is probably going to spark. This will probably be looked back on and seen as like the watershed moment for the labor movement in the games industry. What's going on like right now as we record this. I wish I could be surprised. I'm definitely disappointed, and I think it doesn't serve the client well. I think if anything, that's the thing that surprises me is that someone in the chain didn't say, "Yo, this isn't our brand." And I don't think it destroys everything, right? Like it doesn't destroy the rest of the work. But it's definitely one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I don't know. If I was Zach, I'd be frustrated.
Well, I don't want to take us too long here, but I know this is something that's come up as kind of this idea of like intentionality behind your kind of like choices in terms of what you want your show to do. But I think it goes into those design choices too, and like thinking thoroughly through every decision you're making. Because I mean, this is like just a VR thing, I guess, for you too. But like, if you do an immersive experience and you kind of don't think about shit like that, and it's all of a sudden in your face, I think it's gonna harm your experience a lot more because it's almost gonna provoke a much more visceral reaction. I think from someone like they kind of like see something like going on. So I think it's just important to kind of like be intentional in at literally every aspect of your show and like be thinking through and asking yourself these questions like, what am I doing? How does this like gonna play for people?
Yeah. I mean, I think that third act would have played a lot cleaner for me if the mix of characters had been, the same throughout, right? Like, the solve is just those models that they reserved for the end. If they had been like amongst all the other models, and now at the end, but there's this design choice they made, and whether someone realized it or not, they were furthering a stereotype, and one of the oldest stereotypes in Hollywood at that. So on that cheery note,
No.
not exactly what the PR team hopes for when they invite, and God knows if we get invited again. Probably not, but also who knows? That's the quartet this time out. Anyone got any parting questions, thoughts, notes before we go into the behind closed doors jury deliberations?
I got nothing.
That sounds like a no.
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, for the entire team this time out, I want to say thanks to Kevin and Laura and Blake. The crew will be back next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. This will drop in the feed. And for those of you who are listening, check the next episode in the feed that appears after this one, where you will learn what the pick of the week for the week is going to be. Until then, thank you all for wearing the mask.